Confidence is a podcast from الشرق podcast that talks about dealing with all our insecurities and managing them in order to live a more fulfilling life, whether it be at work or in our lives separately. It is presented by me, Maya Hojeij, and produced by Tahani Khalid. Together, we look for answers to many of our day-to-day questions. And today, we are talking to a very, very special guest who has handled, with a lot of confidence, many issues pertaining to her identity, her journey as a journalist, a woman, and an Arab. Hala Gorani is an Emmy Award-winning and international anchor and correspondent with over 25 years of experience. She has covered history-defining stories and events, most recently as a primetime anchor for her show Hala Gorani Tonight on CNN, and she has currently taken a bit of leave for now. Hala Gorani, welcome to With Confidence.
Thank you for having me, Maya.
So initially we are going to start by telling you that you don't look like an Arab. So your book's title is But You Don't Look Arab. Let's start with that. Why?
Yeah.
Was it the reason why you went for that? Was it soul-searching, healing, self-reflection? What was it?
I think, well, I wanted to write a book about my search for a home, for belonging, for identity. And I thought one of the best ways to illustrate that in the title was to kind of use the sentence that I hear the most when I tell people that my family is originally Syrian, which is, well, you don't look like you might be from the Middle East. And so part of the reason I use that sentence and that reaction that I get so often is also to illustrate that our identity is a very complex, overlapping set of where we come from, our culture, our family, where we were raised, where we were born. So I felt like that was an illustration of the diversity of the region, that Arabs don't all look the same. They don't certainly all think the same way. They're not a monolith. And so therefore somebody can look like me and come from that part of the world. So that's why. And also I thought it was just a fun, provocative title that would get people talking.
Definitely. So Anais Nin says we write to taste life twice, in the moment and in retrospect. Is that why you wrote?
Yeah, and also it was a way to honor, I think, the heritage of my family. I spend a good part of the book talking about my family's journey from the fall of the Ottoman Empire to the war after 2011. It ended up being really a look back at that part of the book, at least, at a history of displacement and a history of always searching for the next and better place. And that, unfortunately, in the last century has really been the history of a part of the Arab world, especially the Levant. And so it was a way to honor that, to research also my family history, and to connect with my roots. And it was important. I think it's a natural human impulse. You know, when you look at this kind of the success of websites like, or DNA sites like 23andMe, we all have this kind of desire to know where we come from. You know, the protagonist in The Invisible Man said, when I learn who I am, I will be free. When I figure out who I am, I will be free. There's an element of that. And I think we all find it comforting to try to dig a little bit deeper into who we are.
When we talk about digging deeper, Hala, I identify a lot with what you said, especially when you quoted Amin Ma'louf. You said that you recognize yourself most with the part of your personality that you feel is rejected. So can we talk about that? Because in all honesty, I am Lebanese. I was born there, and that's it. That's all I lived in Lebanon. And when I went to study for college, but most of my life, I lived in the UAE. There is a problem with identification, whether I'm not Emirati, I am Arab, I am not very close to the Lebanese, but I speak English, my kids don't speak Arabic. It's a bit of a pasta sauce. So how would you identify with your roots there?
That should be the title of my next book. It's a bit of a pasta sauce. I mean, I think that what Amin Ma'louf said is so true, because I also identify with various cultures. I support France in the World Cup. I was raised there. Fundamentally, it's where I feel most at home. It's my native tongue. My family is Syrian. I was born in the U.S. I live in London. I'm married to a German. I work in the English language. And so therefore, yes, it is kind of all these overlapping layers of identity. But what Amin Malouf said is true. When a facet of your identity is attacked, you feel the need to prove people wrong. That these negative things that you think about my culture or my origin are wrong. And you spend a lifetime trying to prove it, especially when you're part of a minority. For me, in the Western media industry, when I was starting out in the 90s, I mean, I'm aging myself, I was the only Arab, on air at CNN. I couldn't think of a single other person that was also from the Middle East in any kind of prominent role on air. That has changed, by the way, thankfully. Yeah. In the last generation, we're seeing a lot more Arab Americans and people of Arab extraction in prominent positions on Western media platforms. That wasn't the case when I started out in my 20s. And so I always felt the need to prove, not just because that was the part of my identity that I felt was most attacked, but because people held some very strong stereotypes about Arabs. Arabs, can you cover the Middle East? You're Arab. Can you be objective? You never ask this of someone who's Western covering a Western story. It's as if you said to a woman, can you cover this story about women's rights as a woman? It's the same illogical kind of observation that you would make regarding anyone from a minority. So you felt like it was an uphill battle back then. Again, that has changed. And now you said I'm taking a break. I'm working as a correspondent for NBC News. So I spent 2-3 months in the Middle East after October 7th. And fundamentally, it is a completely different environment for me as an Arab American woman working in the Middle East than it was when I was much younger.
Would that have had any role in you changing your name at one point in your career, at the beginning of your career?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was when I graduated from a French university in 1995, my father's family name is Ibrahim Basha, and my full name is Hala Ibrahim Basha. And that didn't really play very well in France, apparently. I mean, this is, of course, anecdotal because nobody ever would write back to you saying, we're not going to give you an interview because your name sounds Arab. But on my resume, I had written that I spoke Arabic and that my name was Hala Basha at the time. I had dropped the Ibrahim by that point. And when I was getting no callbacks, my friends at Sciences Po, which is the university I went to, said, I don't think necessarily it's to your advantage to present yourself as being Arab and speaking the Arabic language with an identifiably Arab name. So I dropped Basha. I took my mother's last name, which is Gorani. I removed from my resume the fact that I spoke Arabic, which when you think back is really absolutely tragic because this should be an incredible asset. Yeah. At the time, I removed it. And then I added a photo because I was a blonde, blue-eyed, American U.S. citizen, which I also added in the description. And then I got many more calls after that. So you can draw your own conclusions.
What about being a woman in the industry? That was not an issue. Between being Middle Eastern and being a woman, were there any tug and pulls here and there?
Well, I write in the book that when I was in my early 30s, I wanted nothing more than to go to the Middle East and cover conflicts and do hard news. And I was offered a show called Design 360, which I really didn't want to anchor. And I was told that I was going to do it. It wasn't a question. It was basically I wasn't being asked. I was being told, you're going to anchor the design show. And I thought, well, I mean, would they say this to a man? Would they say to a man, you have to go cover fashion shows? And, and I couldn't care less about the fashion shows. So I went with this kind of like hard news attitude to the fashion shows, and I would go behind the scenes and I would try to show the gritty side of couture and things like that. So after a year, thankfully, they took me off it, and there was another show called Inside the Middle East that had lost its host, and I was thankfully able to front that for almost 8 years, and it was some of the best, I thought, some of the best content that I ever produced in my career, because it was covering the Middle East, but not during a crisis. So a lot of people cover the Middle East when there's a war, there's a revolution, there's a natural disaster like that terrible earthquake, but last year, but I would just go when everything was okay. And you could do a story on, say, Palestinian embroidery in Gaza, which I did, or the Christian community in Malula in Syria, or we went to the UAE and covered the last remaining sort of authentic, Bedouin communities of the UAE and things like that. And that's how I really felt like I started understanding and getting to know properly this region, because you covering it when it's at war or covering it when it's in crisis and in pain, that's not knowing. That's like only knowing. That's like only communicating with someone when they're in the middle of a breakdown. That's not knowing them really, and it's not honoring them in their full identity either. Nice.
In that sense, honoring people and honoring yourself, Hala. Who do you think is going to read this book? Is it people who are searching, identity searchers like yourself? Who is your targeted audience? Is it journalism students? Who's going to read this book, in your opinion, and benefit from it?
Well, my hope is beyond my family and friends.
I will read it for sure. I will read it, I promise.
Honestly, I don't plan on writing another memoir, so I threw a lot at this book. I threw the family history. I threw Middle East history. My grandfather, who was in the government before the regime of the current one. I talked about identity. I talked about journalism. I talked about my love life in some cases, because it's part of who I am too, is the that I married quite late in life and I took a very different path. So I'm hoping that people who are, and they don't have to be Arab. A lot of people come from other parts of the world and have felt somehow that they've had to prove themselves or that they didn't feel like they belonged. So I hope two types of readers, the ones who are interested in the questions of identity and those who are also interested in broadcast journalism, because my trajectory covers it's a period during which the industry has completely changed. It's gone from linear television being the only platform, CNN pretty much the only news channel in the world, really. And I'm talking before Al Jazeera, before Fox, before MSNBC. We were really the only platform, right? From that to now an explosion of platforms, of social media, of every region and every country having 2, 3, 4 news channels, where linear TV, their revenue model, has completely collapsed. You don't, because you're not the only platform, of course, advertisers can go in many different places, and usually now they choose social media or YouTube, or they choose more targeted audiences on news channels that can produce ratings, for instance, with very precise kind of user profiles. CNN International is not a network now that is in a position to do those types of things. So I think that it's interesting, this book, for people who also are curious about how the industry has changed in the last 25 years. I think one of the times that I felt the most professionally kind of fulfilled is when we were doing a story on this is a million years ago. We were doing a story on the truck drivers of Jordan who would go into Iraq during the war and make this unbelievably dangerous journey by road. Nobody drove by road in 2006, 2007 that wasn't willing to take unbelievable risks. The reason they were driving by road is because it was virtually impossible to fly some supplies in. And what they would do is that they would go in, and they were paid something like 10 times what they would normally be paid to make the same journey. So my producer, Shams El-Wazir, and I were on the side of the highway, and I was smelling kind of that dusty Middle Eastern highway smell, and it was very hot. And we interviewed this truck driver, and he said to us, "Let me make you some coffee." And we thought, oh my God, this is going to be horrible. Some coffee off the side of a road. And he boiled the water in the tank off of his truck. So the water was heated because the engine was heating the water. And we drank it with Shams, this Turkish coffee. And it was some of the best coffee I'd ever had. And I don't know why that moment is seared in my memory as a beautiful moment of connection, of finding something in someone else that has nothing to do with your life, that is a complete stranger, and we shared this cup of coffee on the side of the road, in covering a story of misery and war. Mm-hmm. But I felt like I belonged there, and that the smell was the smell of the desert. The color was the kind of the blue of the sky, and the sound was just the sound of us laughing and enjoying a moment of connection. I don't know why my brain went there. I haven't thought of this moment in a really long time. It's not even in the book.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
But it went there.
No, so we have a special story. After all your journey and everything that you covered, Hala, you covered wars, you covered places of conflict, and like you said, you covered the Middle East and happy times as well. But you do stop a lot at your experience in Haiti. You've mentioned it many, many times. Mm-hmm. What was different about this experience? How do you approach, in that sense, balancing objectivity and empathy when covering sensitive and distressing stories like this one?
So Haiti, it was really it was the scale that was very different, because hundreds of thousands of people died or were injured. I mean, I've never seen anything like that, and I don't think, and I hope that in my lifetime I never will, to see the complete obliteration of a city when you drive down a street. There's nothing that you can identify the street by, because there's nothing left. Bodies absolutely everywhere. So that's part of the reason I think that I was so shocked by what I saw there. And I'm not a conflict reporter. I'm not somebody who's used to, thank goodness, seeing this amount of death and destruction. I go occasionally, but I don't do it for a living like some of my colleagues. So it shocked me. It shocked me profoundly to see this amount of death, destruction. It was already the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere to begin with. And then it got hit by this calamity. And you thought to yourself, this is just these people are just cursed with misery and every possible, everything that can happen to a people that is deadly and disastrous has happened to the Haitians. And then I looked into their history and the blockade of the French of their island, and they were the first to rebel against their colonizers, and they were punished for it so relentlessly. And that's what led to this, to their impoverishment for generations and generations, and the injustice of it all just appalled me. And that's part of the reason why the Haiti story, I think, always remained with me for a very long time after I finished covering it.
After all these years, what do you think you can say your career took from you, and what did it give you?
What it took from me is personal time and my personal life for a very long time, because for a very long time I lived in a city where I didn't know anybody. I traveled a lot. I sacrificed personal relationships. What it gave me is immeasurable in terms of just it opened me to the world. It gave me the privilege of being able to tell people stories of of suffering, of beauty, of generosity, of tyranny, of psychopathic warmongering, this whole entire spectrum of human behavior from the best to the worst. And it's such a privilege, and I never took it for granted and still don't take it for granted, the ability to be able to tell people that. I think what it does take away from you sometimes is hope, because for 25 years you report on war, and you hope that people will learn from it, and they really don't. And you think the worst war is the last one you covered, and then something worse happens. And that's really, really dispiriting.
Do you think, based on what you just said, do you think because you have had a successful career so far that you are addicted to small achievements, daily achievements? I have to do this today and this minute and this will give you extra confidence maybe? Or was it other drivers?
I think it's the other way around. I think this desire to always achieve is possibly what led me to do things that are considered conventionally successful, like anchor a show and things like that. I've always been driven by the desire to accomplish things and to prove myself and to do well, and to be creative and to leave something there that wasn't there before because I've written it or I've created it or I thought of it. That's why I love TV news, because TV news is this very fast-paced creative process. So there's nothing at 9 a.m. and at 7 p.m. you have a 3-minute package that you filmed, that you've interviewed people for, and that has come from nowhere, but your own desire to put on camera, to put on paper, and then to record your voice and film the content so that it turns into a digestible, hopefully clear and useful package of news and information. So that's why I enjoy the TV process as well.
You did mention that TV now it is moving away from linear, and there are all those platforms, the digital revolution, media, openness, accessibility, ease of travel. Do you think that the next Arab generation is luckier than we were and has more options to grow and develop personalities and even pursue different careers, be it journalism or anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember 25 years ago, I went to train, it was part of a CNN program, I can't remember which one, but there was a class of Arab journalists who were training to be broadcast reporters. And there was only one TV station. I mean, I can't remember where it was, actually. I think Bahrain or something like this. There was only one or two kind of outlets. And now anybody with a phone can, have their own podcast or their own radio show or their own YouTube channel, and some people become very well known. And we've seen with Gaza, the citizen journalists there, just how much of a difference they're making and how heroic their work has been, because they have used these new platforms and this new technology to spread content and information that would have not made it out of the Gaza Strip even 10 years ago, I don't think.
So,
yeah.
I mean, you did mention the citizen journalist, and when we look at that and we talk about it, do you think that today, with everything that's happening, they are replacing the traditional journalist, or should the traditional journalist maybe evolve or change, or, I don't know, maybe work together? How do you balance between the citizen journalist and the regular?
So I should say that they are journalists, not citizen journalists in all cases, because some of the crews on the ground are professional veteran journalists who've worked alongside and with legacy media networks like CNN and NBC for a very long time, and they have done absolutely unbelievable work in Gaza. The citizen journalists, so meaning ordinary civilians who've taken their phone and filmed and things like that, they're an added and very useful source of information and content. The one thing I would say is that journalists being a journalist, as you know, Maya, is a skill. I mean, you have to, it's not just sort of filming and disseminating. Part of it is also verifying, is fact checking. So there's all of that goes on. So I think if we all work together, and if the governments of Israel and Egypt would allow us to go report from Gaza, which they have not done since October 7th. In fact, I'm a signatory to a letter that was signed by almost 60 international correspondents, including my friend Clarissa Ward of CNN, Alex Crawford of Sky, about a dozen BBC journalists. We are asking the Israeli and Egyptian governments to open Gaza to international journalists for several reasons, to relieve the journalists on the ground who are exhausted. And as you know, there have been over 70 Palestinian journalists killed since October 7th. And secondly, to add our, to be able to work for our networks, to be able to gather the information and the news that we need to gather about what's going on there ourselves. It's essential to allow free, independent journalism to happen in this case, and it's not.
If we talk about what is needed for journalists, not only women, what are the essential qualities in today's world for those journalists?
I mean, I'm going to sound a bit like a dinosaur here, but for me, the qualities are the same as they were when I started. It's accuracy, it's fact checking, and it's empathy with the subjects that you are covering and the people you are covering. And that last one is one of the most important, in my opinion. I've known journalists who've said, okay, this person cried on camera, I've got my soundbite, I'm out of here. That happens, you have to completely resist the temptation to become desensitized, because you sometimes can be when you're exposed to a lot of misery. You can go in that other direction, where you're like, I need to kind of like put my package together, and I don't really feel sympathy and sadness for the people that I'm covering if they're going through a tough time. But also, the first two are just as important. It's accuracy and fact check. And I would add one more thing, especially as I cover this latest story. It's confirmation bias is a very, very big risk in our industry. You have an opinion and you cherry pick the facts to suit that opinion. We all have opinions. This whole myth that you can be completely neutral and objective is nonsense. We all know this. So you have to, this is my experience, it's not everybody's going to be everybody's experience, but you have to check yourself that you're not engaging in confirmation bias, so that this narrative that's in your head, you're going to go pick everything that's going to support it and ignore the things that don't support it. I would add that to young people starting out, especially with social media confirming everything you think, because the algorithm is going to only feed you the content that it knows you already agree with.
What about Arabic? Do you speak Arabic, Hala?
بحكي عربي شوي مع لهجة حلبية تقيلة.
And what's your favorite Arabic cuisine?
بس مايا بفهم بقولك بالعربي بفهم كل شيء.
اوكي.
بقى الناس بسمعوني عم بحكي عربي بيقولوا ما بتحكي منيح، معناتها ما بتفهم منيح، بس بفهم كل
كانوا يحكوا عربي بالبيت كتير؟
ايه كانوا.
اوكي.
لسه بالبيت.
Your favorite food, your favorite Arabic food?
Oh, my family is from Halab, which means that food is an obsession.
Yes.
What's my favorite? I can't even, between the kibbeh and the mtabbal and the hummus and the fattoush and all the home cooking, kibbeh labaniye, kibbeh sajiye, kibbeh siniye, you name it.
I'm going to get hungry now.
I can't even stop. Me too.
Do you cook?
Listen, it's one of my favorite food.
Okay.
I don't love spicy food, and so I was discussing this with my husband today. I love everything that's kind of has aubergine or chickpeas. All of these flavors of the Middle East, I absolutely love. Za'atar is one of my favorite things. I just had it for breakfast. So yeah.
A bit of a personal question. Your husband is a photojournalist as well, and you both come from the same industry. Has that made it harder or easier to move through this journey together?
Oh, immeasurably easier. I mean, not only do we work in the same industry, we both worked at CNN. He's still there. As you mentioned, I left. But we understand absolutely 100% what this job entails. Okay. You know, constantly on the phone, checking the news, waking up first thing, checking the news. He goes to Ukraine, and he goes to all these difficult, dangerous places. And because I've been there too, I kind of can reason myself when it comes to the danger, whereas people who don't really know this environment might get a little bit more worried. I mean, I'm still worried, but I can reason myself if I don't hear from him for 8-9 hours, I'm thinking, okay, I know he doesn't have a signal. It's fine. He told me he wouldn't have a signal, you know. Whereas I suspect that people maybe not in the industry would be a little bit more concerned.
And let's talk about your dog. He has his own Instagram page, and he's an important part of your life. Tell us about him.
Well, because I don't have a creative, I can't. His Instagram page, the pictures are taken by my husband, and you can guess that I probably write the captions. So it's one of my creative outlets. I can let myself completely go in those captions on Louis Lately's Instagram page. And what's interesting is I've never really publicized that page. I mean, it's in my bio on my Instagram. But he organically just kind of he attracted this following of almost 1,500 people. And I'm like, who are these people who are following my dog? But then I get a lot of kind of comments about how people think it's fun and funny to read these captions that are written in the voice of this Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. So I have a lot of fun with it.
بكل ثقة من الشرق بودكاست مع هالة غوراني.
بكل ثقة من الشرق بودكاست مع هالة غوراني.